know how there are some very curated, tightly paced single-player games? They give this perfectly paced, curated adventure, right? But I was wondering, while I absolutely love that, there are also many games that have a completely different focus. Like, for instance, linear games are usually one-and-done stuff, and I love it for that. It's not a negative, but obviously its replayability is taking a hit here. So what are some games that have a different focus going in for them? They want you to replay the stuff, make different choices, see all the endings, explore the map. You know, today we were talking about those kinds of games, like when you'll complete one playthrough and you will have this annoying itch to just go back to the world and do things differently this time. So yeah, let's get into it. I jumped back into Kenshi recently, and man, it is definitely, in my mind, one of the most replayable games ever. Like, it's janky and it is for the most niche type of player, but I just walk away every single time really enjoying my time. And when I say for a certain type of player, my best pitch really is if you played a massive open world RPG and thought, what if this world didn't care about me at all? Like, if you enjoy that ridiculous, almost thick-headed, stupid perseverance and really getting there, you know, the triumph of that final eventual victory, no matter how completely exhausted and beaten down you are, Kenshi is absolutely for you. It's a pretty simple setup, but the execution is incredibly complicated. You start as a complete nobody. You aren't the chosen one with a glowing sword, aren't a famous hero of the realm, but just this stupid, broke, tired guy or girl or a weird bug person standing in the middle of a massive, brutal, and just freaking unforgiving wasteland. The game is straight up just a survival simulating sandbox where everything wants to murder you, rob you, or eat you. On my very first run, I walked out of a dusty little hub town, got immediately beaten unconscious by a group of starving bandits over a piece of dried meat, and was left bleeding in the dirt. I didn't get a game over screen to save me, I just had to watch my guy lay there until a slave trader walked by, patched my wounds, slapped shackles on my legs, and dragged me to a stone mine to work for the rest of my miserable life. And you might think, wow, that sounds absolutely awful, but that was just the first 2 hours of a 150-hour playthrough. Because from there, you have to actually think like a survivor. You start plotting an escape, you manage to pick the lock on your cage, sneak past the heavy guards at midnight, and run out into the freezing desert. You're starving, you're weak, but you are finally free. Then a giant, terrifying, dinosaur-looking creature called a beak thing chases you down and completely bites off your left arm. You survive, somehow, by playing dead, but now you have to crawl to a city and spend days mining copper just to save up enough money to buy a cheap, crappy, rusted robotic replacement limb. That type of progression, that absolute raw freedom, right? Like you're using the game's mechanics and the world's brutal physics to really scramble yourself up from absolute rock bottom to whatever you want to be. Your brain starts to adapt. You're looking for the tiniest little advantage, scavenging scrap off dead bodies from a massive faction battle you didn't even participate in, slowly shimmying your way up the food chain. Also, I want to say that there is some story here. Like, there are light lore elements and world building scattered around the map, but most of it really is the raw gameplay of starting at the bottom and physically, over the course of the entire game, building your own empire. You can play this game for hundreds of hours and never do the same thing twice. You can be a freaking solitary wandering swordsman trying to hunt down bounties, become a stealthy hashish smuggler dodging the zealous Holy Nation patrols. You can build an entire massive city from scratch, complete with defensive walls, automated turret defenses, and wheat farms, and go to full-scale war with the United Cities. The game just scales with your ambition. And also, obviously, I will say that the game is difficult. I struggled for a significant portion of my early hours because it's kind of hard to get the hang of it. Sometimes it's not clear what you're supposed to be doing, and it can feel incredibly frustrating and sometimes tedious. You'll get your entire squad wiped out by cannibals and lose 15-20 minutes because you hadn't saved, and that can be pretty brutal. But it kind of comes with that whole survival thing, that persevering thing. Oh, and also, like, why not just also talk about the looks, like the vibe, looks to this game. So, yeah, obviously they're not going for photorealistic graphics. It looks pretty dated. The immersion definitely breaks if a physics glitch sends a ragdoll body flying into the stratosphere. So again, little things here and there, but I actually love the visual style. You get some really crazy sunsets, some incredible vistas in these weird alien deserts. So I just really didn't have much complaints in that department. And me personally, I think the art style should be the carrying factor of games these days. Red Dead Redemption 2, here we go again, but like booting up RDR2 and the act of traversal itself is so satisfying and meditative. It's amazing, but the overall thing that makes me always come back to RDR2 is the amount of content, the open world and stuff. The main story is phenomenal, don't get me wrong. Some of the best storytelling Rockstar has ever done, some of the best characters in any video game, but the replayability of Red Dead 2 doesn't come from replaying the story, though I've done that 3 times now. It really comes from everything else, like the world itself, the systems, and the way this game is just absolutely overflowing with content that you will miss on your first playthrough. I mean, I can guarantee it. Like, I don't care how thorough you think you are sure to miss some stuff. And like, let me just talk about my first playthrough, right? My first playthrough of Red Dead 2, I played it when it came out in 2018, and I thought I was being pretty thorough. I did a bunch of side quests, hunted some legendary animals, got into the story, and thought that was it. But then, you know, seeing some videos online of the secrets, details, quests, random encounters I had missed, just had to go back again for the next playthrough. Like, the main story missions, those are great, but that's just the foundation. You have stranger missions, which are these side quests that you find out in the world, and there are like 20 something of these, and each one is its own little storyline. Then you have these shit ton of random encounters, random events that happen as you're riding through the world. Someone gets thrown off their horse, someone's getting robbed, someone needs medicine. It all makes the world feel really lively.
Let's keep this between us.
Oh, you saved my life. I owe you.
Got that right.
Also, just hunting and fishing in RDR2. There are like 200 something animals, each with their own behaviors, own habitats, own perfect pelts that you need to get in specific ways. You got legendary animals that you need to hunt and track, and the pelts and materials you get from these animals you can craft into unique outfits and equipment. And like, I know some people are like, oh, hunting and fishing, that's just busy work. But no, I think in RDR2 it's so well done. The hunting has weight to it, the tracking is satisfying, and getting a perfect pelt on a legendary animal feels like a real achievement. And on my first playthrough, I barely touched this stuff. I hunted what I needed for camp upgrades, and that was it. Second playthrough though, I decided I'm gonna be a mountain man. I'm gonna live in the wilderness. I'm gonna hunt every legendary animal, and it completely changed how I experienced the game. And that's the thing about Red Dead 2's replayability. You can play it completely differently each time based on what you choose to focus on. My first playthrough was story focused and just wanted to see what happens, wanted to experience Arthur's art. Second playthrough though, I was a hunter, an explorer, spent way more time in the wilderness, crafted all the unique outfits, filled out the compendium, and also I decided to be a low honor outlaw, which I hadn't really done before because the game kind of naturally pushes you toward high honor if you're doing the story missions and helping people. But playing as a real bastard, robbing everyone, being mean to people, killing people in cold blood, it changes the game. NPCs react to you differently, the story beats play out a little differently too. And also for the map, like you got 5 states, you got mountains, swamps, plains, forests, deserts, snowy regions, and each region has its own ecosystem, own towns, secrets. Basically, RDR2 is this meaty big open world game that just has a shit ton of things to do. Get lost in the world, just live in it.
If I can reel him in.
You got it.
Oh, amazing.
What about loyalty?
Loyal to what matters.
Monster Hunter World. This one, it's a game that is designed from the ground up to be played over and over, and it never gets old. Because Monster Hunter World does something really special with its core gameplay loop that just hooks you in a way that very few games can. Honestly, this series is kind of its own thing. But specifically, Monster Hunter World is an action RPG where you hunt giant monsters in this living, breathing ecosystem. You're a hunter. You get assignments and quests to go out and hunt specific monsters, and when you kill or capture these monsters, you can carve materials from them and use those materials to craft better weapons and armor so you can hunt bigger, tougher monsters. And that's the loop, that's the game. Hunt monster, get materials, craft gear, hunt bigger monster. And on paper, that sounds simple, maybe even repetitive, but I think the way Capcom has designed this game, the way they've layered systems on top of systems, the way they've made every single hunt feel unique and challenging, it's just absolutely brilliant. And the replayability of Monster Hunter World doesn't come from like multiple story paths or different endings or anything like that. The story is honestly pretty basic. You're part of the 5th Fleet going to the New World to study Elder Dragons. There's some mystery about where they're migrating to, and you uncover that over the course of the game. It's fine, like serviceable, gives context to why you're hunting, but nobody is playing Monster Hunter for the lore. You're playing it for the hunting, the meat of the gameplay. Really for that incredible feeling when you finally take down a monster that's been kicking your ass for the past hour. And the replayability comes from the fact that every single hunt is different. Weapon type completely changes how you play the game, and there is so much endgame content that you can play for hundreds of hours and still have goals to work toward. Also, the game has like, I think 14 different weapon types, like completely unique weapon types that each have their own movesets, got own combos and own playstyles, and also the learning curves. You got greatsword, dual blades, hammer, which is all about hitting the monster's head to KO them, and about the monsters, your praise, it has like 30 something large monsters, and then if you include the Iceborne expansion, which you should because Iceborne is basically a whole other game's worth of content, you're looking at like 60 plus large monsters, and each monster is unique. They have their own designs, their own movesets, their own behaviors, their habitats, weaknesses, and learning each monster is its own journey. The first time you fight a new monster, you're probably gonna get your ass kicked because you don't know their tells, you don't know their attack patterns, don't know when to dodge, when to attack or back off. But of course, then you fight them again, and you start to see the patterns. Almost like any hard game with boss patterns, but I think Monster's making it so much more spectacular. And this learning process is so rewarding because the monsters aren't just damage sponges with health bars. They're these living creatures with behaviors and AI that reacts to what you're doing. If you're being aggressive, some monsters will get more aggressive back. If you're staying at range, some monsters will charge you to close the gap. And like, I want to talk about the progression loop, because this is what makes Monster Hunter so addictive and replayable. Every hunt takes like 10-20 minutes depending on your skill level and your gear, and at the end of that hunt you get materials, and you take those materials back to base and you look at what you can craft. Maybe you can't craft the full armor set yet because you need one more gem from that monster, so you go hunt it again. Maybe you got the gem this time, so now you can craft the chest piece, but you still need materials for the leg, and those materials come from a different monster, so you go hunt that one. And it's this constant loop of hunting, crafting, getting stronger, hunting harder monsters, and it never feels like a grind because the hunting itself is fun. The sheer amount of content here is absolutely staggering. The game is specifically designed so that there is literally no way you can see all the content in one playthrough. It brilliantly translates the beloved tabletop rule set into a vast cinematic RPG where your choices actually really shape the fate of the Forgotten Realms. I mean, you're starting off in a pretty crazy setup already. Your character gets abducted by mind flayers and infected with a cerebral parasite. That little brain bug is both the narrative catalyst and a massive gameplay mechanic, granting mysterious powers while posing an existential threat to your entire party. From there, the level of player agency is just off the charts. Like, you can sink hours just into the character creator before you even start the game proper. We are talking some freaking deep depth here, like 11 races with 31 sub-races and 12 classes with 46 subclasses. Be a stalwart dwarven cleric or in Githyanki wizard. Like, whatever your fantasy desires, you got it. And it alters the actual flow of the game because your background selection heavily affects your dialogue options throughout the entire massive campaign. And also, if you played an RPG before and thought, man, I wish my choices actually mattered, this game is definitively for you. You can take an entirely different route in Act 1, and I swear at least half of it was stuff I didn't even know existed. You can literally choose to go through an entirely different biome, like braving the massive underground Underdark or taking the treacherous mountain pass. You can choose to be a nice, helpful, custom character, a slightly selfish person who just wants to cure their parasite, or a directly evil person who maliciously harms NPCs. Or you can play as the Dark Urge origin character, which completely changes the entire vibe and trajectory of the narrative.
Your skull, your brain juices, sticky and sweet.
And then the combat. It unfolds in turn-based sequences where positioning, the environment, and ability synergies determine success way more than just raw brute power. You can push enemies off cliffs, drop chandeliers on groups of foes, or set oil slicks ablaze. With over like a ton of spells and actions available, combat scenarios become tactical puzzles with multiple viable solutions. And because luck plays a huge factor with the dice rolls, things can get completely out of hand incredibly fast. A failed skill check in a tense conversation can lead to somewhat hilarious results, and may even unexpectedly trigger a massive, desperate fight for your life. That type of raw, unscripted chaos makes your brain start to think outside the box, trying stupid ideas to solve a problem and realizing the game actually lets it work. The narrative depth is honestly overwhelming, but like, I am just impressed, really. It all adds up to what I found to be an immensely satisfying, completely gripping experience. Baldur's Gate 3 really is a gem of a single-player RPG.
You're a pawn, a slave to forces you cannot comprehend.
Honestly, from the very first game all the way up to Hitman 3, this franchise has always been insanely replayable, and it all comes down to one core thing: freedom. Every mission gives you a target, but how you deal with that target, that's completely up to you. Now sure, if you go all the way back to the original games, your options were a bit limited, maybe 1 or 2 solid approaches, but as the series evolved, especially in the newer titles, the amount of choice just exploded. Like, the deeper you go into the series, the more creative you can get, and by the time you reach the modern trilogy, it's honestly kind of ridiculous how many possibilities there are. You can replay the same mission 3, 4, even 5 times, and each run can feel completely different. One time you might just walk up and shoot the guy. Simple. Done. Another time you're sniping from halfway across the map. Or maybe you poison their drink, set up some elaborate accident, or trigger some chain reaction that makes the whole thing look like bad luck. And that's where the magic is. These levels are like giant sandboxes, and the game just lets you mess around as much as you want. You can be as methodical or as chaotic as you feel like. Honestly, when it comes to replayability in stealth games, I don't think anything really comes close. Like, yeah, you've got stuff like Splinter Cell where you can replay missions to improve your stealth or avoid being spotted, and Metal Gear Solid, especially Metal Gear Solid 5, gives you a ton of options too, but Hitman is just on another level. There's just a stupid amount of replay value here. Even some of the weaker entries in the series, like Absolution, which people don't always love, are still super replayable. I've gone back to that game multiple times just to experiment with different approaches and see what weird outcomes I could get, and it's always entertaining. And that's the thing, it's not just about replaying missions, it's about discovering all the crazy, creative, and sometimes downright hilarious ways you can take someone out. Some of the kills you can pull off are so unconventional, so weird, that you can't help but laugh at how absurd it gets. A huge part of the fun is figuring it out on your own too. Like, yeah, you could just look up guides or go for the most straightforward method, but that kind of misses the point. The real enjoyment comes from just messing around, experimenting, and seeing what happens. That try something dumb and see if it works energy, that's basically what makes Hitman so addictive. And yeah, there's also that roguelike style freelancer mode, which is actually pretty solid, but even without that, the core games alone already have more replayability than most entire franchises. Now, this collection is basically built around the idea that you can play through one continuous galactic story across all 3 games. And yeah, this is the long one. Even if you're mostly sticking to the main story with some of the bigger side content, you're still easily looking at around 100 hours or more. Right from the start, there's a strong focus on player choice. You play as Commander Shepard, and while the main story beats stay consistent, the way things play out, who lives, who dies, how characters see you, can shift quite a bit depending on your decisions. One of the biggest things that makes this trilogy stand out is how your choices carry over between games. Decisions you make early on, even small ones, can come back later in ways you don't always expect, especially by the time you reach the 3rd game. Your character progression and certain outcomes also persist, which helps everything feel connected. The morality system is built around Paragon and Renegade, where you can lean more towards being diplomatic and compassionate, or more aggressive and ruthless. You're not locked into one or the other, but committing to a direction can open up stronger dialogue options. Then there's the romances, which add another layer to replaying the games. There are quite a few options across the trilogy, some more fleshed out than others, and they do change how you experience certain characters and moments. And since all the DLC is included here, the story feels a lot more complete. Stuff like the Leviathan DLC adds extra context, especially when it comes to understanding the Reapers and their origins, which makes the overall narrative land a bit better. Now, good old Fallout. So Vegas is definitely a little janky, especially considering the older engine, and it is definitely for a type of player, but I just walk away every single time really enjoying my time. It is a massive RPG simulating a completely reactive wasteland. You start off with a pretty intense setup playing as a courier delivering a package, and you immediately get shot in the head and left for dead in a shallow grave over a poker chip. You don't start as a legendary vault dweller looking for their family, you're just some delivery person who survived a bullet to the brain, and from the second you wake up in Doc Mitchell's house, the level of player agency is just totally off the charts. The amount of content here is really fulfilling. You can play this game for hundreds of hours and never do the same thing twice. You have 4 main paths to take to determine the political fate of the Mojave Wasteland. You can side with the sprawling, bureaucratic New California Republic, throw in with the incredibly brutal Caesar's Legion, work for the eccentric billionaire Mr. House, or just say screw everybody and take over the Vegas Strip yourself with a smiling robot named Yes Man. And the game genuinely accommodates all of it. If you want to literally kill almost every single NPC you meet, the game lets you do it and still provides a path to the ending. And your brain really starts to adapt to the freedom. You are looking for the tiniest little advantages and leaning heavily into the RPG mechanics. You can build a charismatic smooth talker with a maxed out speech skill and literally talk your way out of the final boss fight. Or you can be a hulking brute who just solves every problem with a super sledge. The faction reputation system adds an insane layer of strategy. Wear the wrong armor in the wrong town and a faction will shoot you on sight. Help out an isolated group of boomers at an Air Force base and they might literally fly a bomber in to help you during the massive final battle at Hoover Dam. But now look, the immersion definitely breaks if a rad scorpion glitches through a rock and launches into the stratosphere because, you know, it's that classic Bethesda published physics engine. So again, little things here and there. But I actually love the visual style. When you first see the glow of the New Vegas Strip in the distance and the radio stations hit perfectly at specific moments, giving you a little bit of awe and wonder while you're wandering around a nuclear wasteland listening to old cowboy tunes. And also, if you played an RPG before and thought, man, I wish I actually had to survive in this world, the hardcore mode is definitively for you. You have to manage your hunger, your thirst, and your sleep. Stim packs heal over time instead of instantly, and your ammo actually has weight. It turns a standard playthrough into a grueling tactical trek where you're constantly scavenging for clean water and irradiated food just to make it to the next way station. Those little micro moments, the things you discover as you explore the hidden vaults, the massive mistakes you make, that to me was a big part of the story. Dishonored. I keep coming back to this one game specifically, but some of you maybe haven't played this, or you played it once like years ago and you kind of just moved on, and I really need you to stick with me here because I genuinely think this is one of those games that does not get talked about enough in this specific conversation, the replayability conversation. Because when people talk about Dishonored, they talk about the story or the world or the powers, and yeah, all of that is great, but like the real magic, the thing that makes this game genuinely special is that it is structurally from the ground up designed to be played over and over again, and most games just are not built like that. So Dishonored came out in 2012, and when it dropped, I remember people kind of reacting to it like, oh, this is cool, this is a stealth game, this is fun, and then kind of moving on. And it did well, it was well received, but I don't think people fully clocked what they were holding in their hands at the time, because what Arcane made here is what people in the game space call an immersive sim, and that term gets thrown around a lot, but like Dishonored might be the clearest, purest, most accessible example of what an immersive sim actually is and what it can do when it's firing on all cylinders. And also, the basic setup is that you are Corvo Attano. You're the royal bodyguard to the Empress of Dunwall. Dunwall is this incredible steam pump, whale oil-powered, plague-ridden city that is just dripping with atmosphere and detail. And very quickly at the start of the game, the Empress gets assassinated right in front of you. Her daughter, Emily, gets kidnapped, and you get framed for the murder. You get thrown in prison, and then you escape. You link up with a group of loyalist rebels, and you set out to find Emily, clear your name, and take down the people who betrayed you. It's a revenge story. It's a political thriller. It's dark, and it's gritty, and it's really well done. But, and I cannot stress this enough, the story is almost secondary to how you actually play the game. From the very first mission, the game hands you a toolbox, and that toolbox is enormous. You've got Blink, which is essentially a short-range teleport. You can possess animals and humans, you can stop time, you can summon a swarm of rats, you can see through walls, you can link enemies together so that when one dies, they all die. There is so much stuff here, and every single one of these abilities can be upgraded, and they interact with each other in ways that the game sometimes doesn't even fully tell you about. You just discover them, you stumble into them, and that right there is already already like, okay, this is a game you can play multiple times just from a pure mechanics standpoint. So like, let me try to bring this all together because I feel like I've been kind of going all over the place here and I want to land this properly. What makes Dishonored one of the greats in replayable games is not any one thing, not like only powers or everything but the chaos system, the level design. It is the combination of all of those things working together, feeding into each other in a way that makes every single playthrough genuinely feel like a different game. A low chaos ghost run through Dishonored is a tense, methodical, almost zen experience where you feel like the world's most competent invisible predator. A high chaos, full power, loud and messy run is like you feel like a supernatural force of nature tearing through this city and watching it crumble behind you. And emotionally, those two things hit completely differently. Devil May Cry 5 felt like a huge comeback for the series. After a long gap and a divisive reboot, a lot of fans were just waiting for the mainline games to return, and when this dropped, it really felt like the series was back on track. A big reason for that is the 3 playable characters, and this isn't one of those cases where they feel slightly different. They play so differently that each one almost feels like their own game. Nero is the most approachable. He's got a sword and a gun, but there's a lot of depth in how you use them, especially with timing and combo flow. On top of that, he has interchangeable mechanical arms that each give him different abilities. You're constantly deciding when to use them and when to save them, which adds a layer of strategy to every fight. Then there's V, who is easily the most unusual. Instead of fighting directly, he commands summoned creatures to attack while he stays at a distance. At first it can feel a bit strange, but once it clicks, it turns into this really unique style of gameplay where you're managing multiple things at once and controlling the battlefield in a completely different way. It's not for everyone, but it makes replaying his sections feel fresh. And then you have Dante. This is where the game's depth really opens up. He has a massive toolkit, multiple weapons, guns, and combat styles, and you can switch between all of them in real time. The game expects you to constantly mix things up mid-fight, and learning how everything connects takes time, but that's what makes him so rewarding to play. All of this ties into the style ranking system, which is a huge part of the game's replayability. Every fight is graded, and if you want high ranks, you can't just play well, you have to play creatively. Repeating the same moves actually hurts your score, so the game is always pushing you to experiment and improve. Once you get into that mindset, every mission starts to feel like a performance rather than just a fight. The difficulty modes also play a big role. As you move up, enemies become more aggressive and encounters change in ways that force you to adapt. It's not just harder, it actually feels different, which gives you a real reason to come back and try again with better skills and understanding. There's also Bloody Palace, a combat-focused mode where you fight through waves of enemies for as long as you can survive. It strips the game down to its core and gives you a pure test of how well you've mastered each character. And if you're playing the special edition, you also get Virgil as a playable character, who brings his own distinct style focused on precision and control. Just like the others, he adds even more depth and replay value. So when you put it all together, Devil May Cry 5 stands out as incredibly replayable, not because of length or story choices, but because of how deep its mechanics go. The more time you invest, the more the game gives back. What starts as a fun action game can turn into something much more satisfying the deeper you get into it, and that's what keeps people coming back. Metal Gear Solid 5. I'll be honest, I have a really complicated relationship with this game, because on one hand, it's one of the most ambitious and mechanically rich games I've ever played, and on the other, it's clearly unfinished. That tension has stuck with me for years, but despite that, I keep coming back to it, more than almost any other game I own. And the reason is simple. The gameplay loop is so deep and so flexible that it never really gets old. At its core, The Phantom Pain is an open-world stealth game set across large, sandbox environments filled with enemy outposts, patrols, and objectives. And the key thing is this: the game almost never tells you how to complete a mission. It gives you a goal and lets you figure it out. You can approach any objective in dozens of different ways. Go in silently and never be seen. Create distractions and slip through unnoticed. Attack head-on. Intercept targets before they even reach their destination. Change your approach based on time of day or weather. Every mission becomes less about completion and more about choice. And that's where the replayability really comes from. You're not just asking, can I do this? You're asking, how do I want to do this time? Then there's the mother base, which adds a whole layer on top of the gameplay. You're constantly extracting soldiers and resources from missions to build and expand your base. The better your staff, the better gear you unlock, and that feeds right back into the missions, giving you new tools and new strategies to experiment with. Loadout customization is another huge part of it. You're not just picking weapons, you're modifying them, adjusting how they function, and tailoring them to your playstyle. Stealth setups, aggressive builds, hybrid approaches, all of them feel distinct, and going back to old missions with new gear genuinely changes how they play. The buddy system adds even more variety. Each companion changes how a mission feels, whether it's scouting enemies, providing support, or just helping you move around more efficiently. Even choosing to go in alone creates a completely different kind of challenge. On top of that, the game ranks your performance. If you want the best results, you need to play clean, efficient, and smart. That pushes you to replay missions, refine your approach, and aim for better execution each time. There's also a huge amount of side content, all built on the same systems as the main missions, so it never really feels like filler. Everything feeds back into your progression, keeping the loop engaging. And yes, the unfinished second chapter is a real issue. The story doesn't fully land, and you can feel where things were cut. But what's interesting is that the core gameplay doesn't suffer because of it. The systems are complete, the depth is there, the replayability is still intact. And that's why this game sticks. It gives you tools, systems, and freedom, then lets you experiment. The world even adapts to how you play, forcing you to change tactics over time. I've gone back to this game again and again, trying new approaches, new strategies, new loadouts, and every time it still feels fresh. That's what makes it so replayable. Not just the amount of content, but the depth of the systems and the freedom to approach them however you want. It's a pretty simple setup. You play as Zagreus, the prince of the underworld, and you're just trying to escape your dad's house. And the game is straight up just a fast-paced isometric action game. But what really makes Hades work is that every time you die, and you are gonna die a lot, you don't feel that crushing weight of losing 20 minutes or an hour of progress. You get sent back to the house of Hades, and suddenly dying is actually kind of rewarding. You get to talk to people, you get to spend your darkness to upgrade your stats permanently, you unlock new weapons. And then there's the actual combat. You dictate exactly how you want to play based on your armory. You got the sword, the spear, the shield, the bow, the fists, the railgun. But then you start finding boons from the Olympian gods along your escape route. And this is where the replayability just goes entirely off the rails. You might get a run where Zeus is throwing chain lightning on your attack, and Poseidon is pushing dudes into walls with your dash. You're constantly conjuring up these ridiculous builds. It really depends on where you're grabbing power-ups, and your brain starts to think like a crazy tactician, where you're looking for the tiniest little synergy to melt a boss. You have to actually think about your moves, choosing carefully, but there are times where you gotta hurry up and just react, because the screen is covered in projectiles. The story overall is actually massive, but it's doled out in these little micro moments. There are thousands and thousands of lines of dialogue. You'll walk into a boss fight with a specific god's boon, and the boss will literally comment on it. The game has all that stuff, and it does a great job with that as well, as having some really nice music that hits perfectly at specific moments, giving you that hype when you're fighting your way out of Tartarus. The quiet writing, the small stuff you find along the way, just does a really good job setting you up to take something away from it. Every single character reacts to what you're doing, who you're talking to, and what weapons you're holding. And I will say that the game is difficult. I struggled for a significant portion of the early game because it's kind of hard to get the hang of it. Sometimes you get a bad combination of boons, and it can feel incredibly frustrating. But there is something about that continued, ridiculous, almost thick-headed, stupid perseverance, and really getting there, you know? The triumphs of that final, eventual victory. But when you finally beat the final boss and break out, the game essentially just starts. There are multiple modes basically when you unlock the Pact of Punishment. You can add heat, making enemies faster, giving bosses completely new moves, putting a time limit on yourself. So the stuff isn't just for a quick challenge, it's for actually keeping the game fresh for hundreds of hours. I felt like I had mastered the game, and then it just handed me a whole new layer of tactical mechanics to really learn the ins and outs. Resident Evil 4 Remake, my favorite game from the series, and of course we are playing as Leon, dropping into this creepy European village to save the president's daughter. And the game is straight up just an incredible action horror survival experience. But what makes this game so damn replayable is the raw gameplay loop and the sheer amount of ridiculous stuff you can unlock. They brought back the satisfaction of a well-organized attaché case, which was one of the original game's subtler pleasures, allowing you to organize your inventory as efficiently or as chaotically as you like. But now they've added an auto sort feature and attachable charms that grant Leon a variety of perks. And the combat, man, the new parry and knife system completely changes the flow of everything. You dictate exactly how you want to handle a crowd. You can parry a dude throwing an axe, shoot a guy in the knee, run up for a melee kick, and just scramble your way through these massive encounters. Your brain starts to think like a crazy tactician where you're looking for the tiniest little opening. You can choose your moves very carefully, sneaking around, but there are times where you gotta hurry up, you gotta think quick because there's a guy with a chainsaw revving it right behind you. But finishing the campaign is basically just a warm-up. This is just a good-ass game that defines replayability. You beat it, you unlock New Game Plus, and suddenly you are chasing these insane completion challenges. There's also this whole merchant economy where you collect spinels by doing side quests. If you save up 30 of them, you can buy an exclusive upgrade ticket. You slap that on a weapon like the hand cannon, and boom, infinite magnum ammo. All of this comes together with strong visuals, improved gunplay, and really solid progression systems. The more you play, the more you understand how everything works, and the more you start experimenting, optimizing, and pushing the game further.
Not bad, right?
Sniper Elite 5 doesn't treat sniping like simple point and click. Every shot has weight. You have to think about distance, movement, and timing. If you've been running around, your aim won't be steady. You need to slow down, line things up, and take the shot properly. And when you land it, the game rewards you with its signature X-ray kill cam. It's slow motion, over the top, and incredibly satisfying. Watching a perfectly lined up shot connect never really gets old. And now even close-range weapons can trigger those moments, which keeps things fun even when things go wrong. But the real strength of the game is its map design. The levels are huge, detailed sandboxes with multiple paths and approaches. You're dropped into an area with an objective, and it's completely up to you how you want to handle it. You can play it slow and methodical, picking enemies off one by one from a distance. You can sneak through buildings and avoid confrontation, or you can go loud and cause chaos. The freedom in how you approach each mission is what makes replaying them so interesting. You can take a completely different route and end up having a totally different experience. The game also keeps things fresh with weapon customization. You're constantly finding ways to improve and tweak your loadout, adjusting your weapons to fit your playstyle. And since you can adapt mid-mission, you're never locked into one approach. If things fall apart, you can switch things up and keep going. But what really pushes the replayability to another level is Axis Invasion mode. At any moment, another player can enter your game as an enemy sniper. Suddenly, everything changes. What was a predictable stealth mission becomes a tense game of cat and mouse. You're no longer just dealing with AI. There's a real person tracking you, reacting to your actions, and trying to outplay you. It forces you to stay alert, rethink your strategy, and adapt constantly. Even if you know the map inside out, that human element makes every run feel different. And that's what makes Sniper Elite 5 so replayable. It gives you a massive sandbox, a flexible toolkit, and just enough unpredictability to keep every mission feeling fresh. When people think endlessly replayable, they usually picture huge open world games or roguelikes. Desperados 3 doesn't fit that image at all. It's linear, story-driven, and top-down. But if you skip it, you're missing one of the best examples of pure gameplay-driven replayability. This game is all about precision. Every enemy placement, patrol, and line of sight is carefully designed. On your first run, you're just trying to survive. A few playthroughs later, you start to understand the systems, and suddenly you're pulling off clean, perfectly timed takedowns like you've mastered the map. A huge part of what makes it work is how the game treats failure. You're expected to mess up. The quick save system is always there, letting you experiment without punishment. Try something, fail instantly, reload, try again. That loop turns every encounter into a puzzle you slowly solve through trial and error. And when it finally clicks, when you clear a heavily guarded area without being detected, it's incredibly satisfying. The real depth comes from your team. Each character has completely different abilities, and combining them is where the magic happens. You're not just picking off enemies, you're setting up coordinated moves, distractions, and chain reactions. That all comes together with Showdown Mode, which lets you pause time, assign actions to each character, and then execute everything at once. You can plan out these perfectly synchronized takedowns and watch them play out in real time. It's easily one of the most satisfying mechanics in the game, and it makes you want to replay missions just to try new combinations. The environments also play a huge role. Each level is packed with different paths, hiding spots, and interactive elements you can use to your advantage. Instead of brute force, the game rewards creativity, finding smarter, quieter, and more efficient ways to deal with situations. Replayability really kicks in with the challenge system. Each mission has optional objectives that push you to play in completely different ways, faster, cleaner, or with heavy restrictions. You can't do everything in one run, so you're encouraged to go back and approach the same level from a totally new angle. There are also extra challenge modes that remix missions and force you to rely on different strategies, keeping things fresh even after you've learned the maps. And that's what makes Desperados 3 so special. It doesn't rely on randomness or endless content, it's all about depth, design, and player creativity. You start out struggling through each encounter, and by the time you've really learned the game, you're executing perfect plans like a tactical mastermind. And once you reach that point, it's hard not to go back and do it all over again, just a little bit better.